It's finally time to talk about the 2024 EV tax credit. This video took a little bit longer than I thought to get together because the IRS took quite some time to give us complete details about the point of sale tax credit, which is the big thing that just started in 2024. But before we get to that and all of the other things you need to know if you're shopping for an EV this calendar year, let's roll through the big thing, which is which EVs will and won't get the tax credit at this moment as of February 6th, the date that we are actually filming this video. So the most important ones, of course, the biggest volume models are going to be the Tesla Model Y, the rear-wheel drive Performance, and yes, the long-range all-wheel drive. They are all going to be federal tax credit eligible. The Model 3 Performance will get it, but the other Model 3 versions will not because of the battery pack. We'll talk about those requirements a little bit later. The Tesla Model X, that will get the credit, but huge asterisk here, very important, not the 3-row Model X. More on that in a bit too. The Tesla Model S, it will not get the credit because it is too expensive. And that is also the problem for the Tesla Model X 3-row. From Chevy, we have the Bolt and the Bolt EV. Those will get the full credit. At the moment, however, we don't know about the Lyriq, the Blazer, the Equinox, or of course the related Honda Prologue. General Motors and Honda say that they feel they are well positioned as far as that tax credit goes. I would expect by the end of the year they will get it, but it does mean that if you have bought one or you are buying one, assuming it qualified for the battery content, etc., you would have to file for that credit yourself. There's no way to do it retroactively. You'd have to wait till your tax return for that. But if you wait a little bit later in the year, you may be able to do the point of sale credit. The Ford Mustang Mach-E does not get it. The Ford F-150 Lightning may or may not, depending on the trim, so be very careful with those VIN numbers. The Ford Escape and the Lincoln Corsair, they will get half the tax credit in 2024. The Rivian R1S and R1T, they will also get half the tax credit. Big asterisk on the pricing of those vehicles, however. The Volkswagen ID4, it will get the full tax credit, as will the Chrysler Pacifica plug-in hybrid, but the Jeep 4xEs, they will only qualify for half of the tax credit. On the EX90, the Rivian, the Teslas, etc., big thing to know is the price limit of the vehicles. If the SUV, truck, or van is over $80,000 MSRP, including manufacturer factory options, but excluding the destination charge, then it can qualify for the credit, assuming the rest of the qualifications are met. On the sedan side, though, it's $55,000 maximum, and that's why you don't see tax credits on the Lucid Air, etc., because they're just too expensive. Also on the Model S. The price cap is the reason that I don't expect the upcoming Dodge EV to qualify for any federal tax treatment at all. It's worth noting that these price limits do not index with inflation or index with anything at all. They are just fixed. $80,000 for the truck, SUV, van, $55,000 for the sedan. And I could see that becoming a big problem as especially price tags at Ford have really accelerated and General Motors has really failed to deliver some of those low price tags that they were initially promising. The other restriction that is also not indexed to anything is the limit on adjusted gross income. If your adjusted gross income is over $300,000 filing jointly, $225,000 filing as head of household, or $150,000 for single filers, you cannot qualify for the federal tax credit. That brings us neatly along to the big change for 2024. The ability to transfer your tax credit to a dealer. Whether you're going to be buying a Chevy Blazer later this year that maybe will qualify for the full federal tax credit, or a Tesla Model Y direct from the manufacturer that qualifies for the full credit, you can transfer that $7,500 to your dealer or to Tesla, and then that comes right off the top of your purchase agreement. So you aren't financing as much money, you're going to save money on the interest. Big deal there. But also some big caveats there. The first one is you pay sales tax on the full purchase price, not the reduced price less that tax credit. And that's because according to the IRS, this is still a tax credit. It is not making the purchase cheaper. They're just refunding you that money or refunding the dealer that money in advance, assuming that all of the other limitations are satisfied. And those limitations still apply here, but with some different asterisks. On the adjusted gross income front, if you had your adjusted gross income under the limits last year, This year doesn't matter. You could go over $300,000 gross income for a family, and you'll still get the tax credit. If, however, you were over that limit last year, and you think you're going to be under it this year, but then December rolls around, you bought an EV, you got the credit transferred, and it turns out, oops, I made $301,000 this year, the IRS is going to want you to pay that money back. And they know who you are because you filed for that when you bought the car. You gave them all that information, you agreed to it. Tax filing season comes along, you have to pay that $7,500 in tax back. On the other hand, even though the IRS says this is not a refundable tax credit, it has effectively turned into one for some tax filers. If, say, you live in the Midwest and you have a mortgage and you have kids, so you have child tax credits and education credits and you have mortgage credits, etc., you could find yourself in a situation where you have very little or no tax liability, and in the before times, you wouldn't get an EV tax credit because it's non-refundable. They won't just give you more than your tax liability. With this setup, though, it's different, and the IRS has confirmed this in their latest recommendations and guidelines, detailed down there in the description. If you have no tax liability, you transfer that $7,500 to the dealer, the end of the year rolls around and you file your taxes, you don't have to pay that $7,500 back. So it has effectively turned into a refundable credit. And that could be a big, big deal for some of these filers that are within this realm of affordability, have the adjusted gross income below the requirements, but you have a big mortgage, you got a lot of kids, etc., and you want an EV, you could end up in this category where you will still get this credit. And that could be a big, big deal. Just be sure to check with your dealer in advance, I would say before you go to the dealer, that the car you're looking at by VIN number and the dealer you're considering buying it from are both in the program for the point of sale credits. Because I do know a number of dealers that have decided to take a wait and see approach to this. They have not registered by the IRS and they're not doing point of sale credits. However, it does appear that the majority of EV dealers, especially the higher volume EV dealers, are certainly on board with this program because it means they're going to be getting the business and those other dealers are going to be left out in the cold. Next up, the used car tax credit. This is a big, big deal because there have been some teething troubles with this program. Here's how it works. If the car is over 2 years old, then you can get a used tax credit on it, assuming that it's never had a used tax credit pulled on it before. And this is where some coordination is going to be required. You're going to have to look up the VIN number with the dealer, make sure that this EV qualifies. You could get up to 30% of the price of the EV off, up to $4,000 maximum benefit. So that's important to note. When you're talking about a used EV that's about $13,500 up to the maximum of $25,000, that entire range is going to get $4,000 off the top. But you'll also get 30% off of a $10,000 EV. So that really used EV, it's actually going to have pretty decent tax treatment on it. Other limitations apply, of course. You can only do this once every 3 years. And that's a big, big deal. So no buying used EVs with $4,000 off every year. Also, lower income limits apply. Your AGI has to be under $150,000 for a married couple, under $75,000 for someone filing singly. Then there is, of course, that maximum price cap of $25,000. That does not include sales tax and registration, but it does include anything else the dealer is trying to toss on the hood. Also, if you live in a state that allows you to take cash off the top for a trade-in, that doesn't apply. So you can't buy a $50,000 used EV with your $25,000 trade-in, say in Washington, D.C., and then expect the tax credit to qualify as if it was a $25,000 EV. It's still not. You just kind of factored in that trade-in value. So that is not allowed. You also have to buy the used EV through a qualifying dealer. So you can't just phone up your buddy and have him sell you his used Model 3 and expect to get $4,000 off the top. The tax credit legislation we currently operate under had two significant goals in mind. Obviously, to incentivize the purchase of plug-in hybrid and battery electric vehicles, but secondarily, to forever change the way the supply chain for these same vehicles works. And they do that by restricting where the parts and minerals, etc., can come from in order to qualify for the credit. Also, where the vehicle is assembled. And that's why we see a rapid rise in commitments from manufacturers to start building their EVs in North America, start building their batteries in North America, and we are seeing a pretty significant change in the way the materials for these batteries are being sourced. Big changes happened in 2024, and another big change is happening in 2025. That's why the number of qualifying EVs in 2024 is less than it was last year, and next year is probably going to be even lower. Starting January 1st, 2024, 50% of the minerals for the battery pack must come from the United States or one of our free trade allies around the world. So Canada, Mexico, Australia, South Korea, etc., etc. But starting in 2025, none of them can be extracted in or processed in China or Russia or other countries of concern, according to the United States. That's going to have a big impact next year, but the 50% requirement already had a pretty darn big impact in 2024. What had a bigger impact in 2024 is that 60% of the battery component cost must come from North America, and none can come from China this year. That's why there has been this scrabble with some of these other EVs, because trying to make sure that these components were not manufactured in China or the companies didn't have significant links to the Chinese government has proved a bit complicated. And of course, the manufacturers have to submit all this to the government. The government has to make sure that it's all copacetic, and then they can qualify for the tax credit. That's probably why the Blazer, the Equinox, etc. are a little bit delayed, but most likely they'll iron things out. The question is, will they iron out the ones they already made or not? That we don't know yet, but stay tuned because hopefully we'll know a bit more soon. Perhaps the most important thing, though, is that these requirements continue to ratchet up and up and up. Last but not least, we need to talk about the gaping chasm that is the EV lease loophole. What is it? Why is it? How does it work? How on earth did we get here? Well, first things first. Remember, corporations are people too. I kid, but only a little there. Honestly, though, there is a reason to incentivize businesses when it comes to EV purchases, because if you want your local utility to buy EVs and be more green, if you want to reduce emissions here with your carpet cleaning company or there with your doggy delivery service, there should be a reason for these companies to buy more expensive electric vehicles, and therefore we get the EV tax credit. The tricky bit is, because of the way leases work, you get the tax credit too. Even if you made $5 million last year adjusted gross income, you could get the credit because you aren't titling a leased vehicle in your name. The lease company is titling it in their name. They're getting the tax credit as a corporation, and maybe or maybe not, they're passing the tax credit along to you. It does depend on the lease company. According to Section 45W of the legislation here, I'll just quote it, commercial buyers of a qualifying clean vehicle are eligible for the federal tax credit, but without the same vehicle assembly income or other restrictions of the consumer EV tax credit. And that last tricky bit is the problem. And it is the reason that when this all went to court, the courts ruled, hey, it wasn't worded how you thought it was worded, the way you worded it. Lease shoppers are in because they're exempted from these restrictions. They're not the ones owning the vehicle. They're just renting it from the company that actually does own the vehicle. However, not all companies are into the party here, but here's the ones that are. BMW, Mini, Chrysler, Jeep, Ford, select models there, Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, Jaguar, Toyota, Lexus, Nissan, Aria only there, Polestar, Volkswagen, Porsche, Audi, Volvo, Subaru, Mercedes, Lucid, and a few others. But notably missing, General Motors, they're not doing that. The Nissan Leaf, of course, the Ford F-150 in some trims as well. I get asked this question a lot, even from colleagues in the industry. Why aren't all companies doing this? And what exactly is going on? Well, remember that this is still a tax credit for the business. And if the company that's titling that vehicle doesn't pay much or any taxes, depending on where the money is going and how it's going through a corporate structure, etc., there actually may not be any actionable tax credit there to do anything with. And so that could be why some companies either don't offer a complete credit or it's slightly discounted here and there, etc. There is, of course, one obvious loophole with this particular program. It's that leasing a car and then purchasing it at the end of the lease may actually be cheaper than just buying it outright, depending on the vehicle. And almost certainly most lease programs that will allow you to buy a vehicle day 2 of your lease, this is going to be the cheaper way to go if you have the cash to do it. Lease the vehicle, get that tax credit right there from the lease company. Day 2, phone up the lease company for a lease buyout, pay your lease off. Hey presto, you could have a BMW i4 or a Lucid Air that's way over these limits and yet somehow still magically had a tax credit. So let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below, and especially let me know if you have tried to buy a used EV but have had troubles getting the used EV credit. The way this seems to be working is that the IRS database is a little bit crazy, let's be frank, and sometimes the dealer will put in a VIN number and it keeps getting rejected for whatever reason. If you really, really, really want that Volkswagen e-Golf or that whatever, insert whatever other EV here into this conversation, you may need to work with that dealer and just pressure the dealer to keep trying to figure out what's going on. There are support numbers they can contact, etc. They can email in for assistance, and that is the only way to push that forward. You cannot claim the used EV tax credit later, so if you want it, you may have to work for it. Let me know down there, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned for other updates, including more details on Blazer, Equinox, and Prologue, Lyric, blah, 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 etc. coming here soon. See all of you later.